But Ward, being the super genius that he was, figured out this amazing bridging technique to hold all this stuff together.
Oh yeah, look, the entire floor is covered in wood.
Yeah, I'm doing it Egyptian style.
Yeah, for real.
I mean, if you've ever been around an engine like that starting up, it's something you'll never forget. It makes every hair on the back of your neck stand up, that's for sure. That was extra dumb.
What is this?
Oh my God.
The thing that's amazing to me was that this entire frame is riveted together without welds. That looks like a really heavy thing.
It's super heavy, you know.
Look at this guy. His fingers are like right there.
Yeah, look, dude, get your fingers out of there.
Get your fingers out of there. All right, so we're here with Tom, the founder of CertifyMe. We're going to go through some photos from the crane and rigging days from your old company DMX from the 90s, just like the last video. Some really great
past. Yeah.
Really great old photos in there. So we're going to see what kind of interesting stuff we can see.
Yeah, God dang. We're at Studio 3B here and world headquarters in Phoenix, and it's going to be 117 today. And talk about heat stress. Oh my gosh. It is just miserable outside. It's 8 o'clock. And unfortunately, the air conditioning is out in the studio. And so we're just going to kind of muscle through as much as we can. It is just gnarly hot outside. And, you know, I've got some guys working in my backyard, working on a patio with decking around my pool. And I feel bad for them. But you know what? I've been right there doing it for decades. So I know their pain. And this job that you're about to talk about was kind of one of those. It was in the summertime in Tumwater. You have the picture of it?
Mm-hmm. Right here.
That machine, Tumwater, Washington, just south of Olympia, or north of Olympia, right around Olympia, Washington. You know, Olympia, their beer was always known for its water, but the town where the water came from was called Tumwater, which I always found kind of ironic. Sure, people from Tumwater won't appreciate that, but anyway, this machine is a machine that weaves a filament. It's almost like really heavy duty fishing line, like 300-pound test monofilament fishing line, and it weaves it into almost like a rug. And this thing, there's like a 3-meter warp and a 7-meter warp and a 10-meter warp. And they can modularize them, make them bigger and bigger. And what the warps are used for, it makes a big plastic belt that they pour liquid slurry paper on, and then they spread it out on this thing called a warp, and then they heat it and dry it and do all kinds of stuff to it. I have no idea, but this is the machine that makes the warp, that makes the paper that they pour the pulp out on to make paper, to process paper. And this machine had never really been moved before in one piece. And the guy I was working with at the time, Ward Clark, he was the guy that really figured out how to do this and move these machines all in one piece. Because you can see how complicated they are. Look at those little jack shafts and weighted shafts, and see all those couplers? That's each section of the machine. So literally, when they buy one new and it has to come in and be assembled, it would take, you know, literally 5 or 6 months to put one of these things together. You know, and the longer, the harder it was. But Ward, being the super genius that he was, figured out this amazing bridging technique to hold all this stuff together, to tie it all together, so we could actually, we loaded it on the truck with rollers. We jacked up the truck bed to be level with the loading dock, and then rolled this thing out onto trucks. It was an amazing job. And we spent literally, I'm going to say like 10 days just doing these turnbuckles up and down this thing and all around it and tying it all together.
Oh, I see. So this is a turnbuckle here. This is a turnbuckle here. So you're basically clamping the whole assembly together so that you can move it all in one piece without having to take it apart.
Exactly. And then just making a whole bunch of triangles. And if you see the bridge, we bridged up it naturally had a thing to keep it rigid, that bridge piece on top. So we utilize that about every, 5 or 6 feet all the way down on these things. I think there was 4 or 5 of them that we moved.
Wow. And so the idea is each of these foot pads on the bottom, you'd have to take this out as a separate part and then remove these center shafts. Otherwise, you would bend them.
Correct. Yeah. Really, really a heavy duty millwright job. A lot of leveling and really hardcore alignment and leveling, which is, you know, the millwright's job.
That is
I was
so
never
cool.
a qualified or in any other capacity millwright, but we were pretty good at moving machinery. So
What's a millwright?
a millwright and would typically be the guy that you know, if you think about it, the millwright would be the guy that kept the mill running. The guy that would line up all the wheels and with the water wheel mill or the windmill or the whatever it is, the generator for the town at the time. And the millwright is the guys, the team that levels the machines, puts it all together, assembles it all, wires it all up, makes sure all the electrical motors and everything's turning the right direction. They literally will hand the machine off, ready to operate to the owners when they're done. And we weren't that involved. We were just the riggers. And we had millwrights we worked with, and they would do the electrical and we would do the rigging. So
And so I'm noticing, so this this big square here is to protect this shaft, which looks like polished steel, like super precise, with another turnbuckle here, but it doesn't look like you're lifting from this turnbuckle. You're just keeping it together.
correct. That was really the whole thing. It wasn't really about really supporting anything other than just one section at a time and then supporting each section off of each section. It was
Right.
just a
And then,
million. I don't know how many of those cables and turnbuckles we put together, but it had to have been in the hundreds.
because the idea is when it's flat on the ground, it can support its own weight if all of its foot pads are touching. And then if you lift it in that same configuration, it won't tear itself apart.
Exactly. And you know what? Ward wasn't really sure that this was going to work, but this company had so much faith in him because he had been working for him in New York for a long time. And they had so much confidence in Ward, and his son actually came out from New York to help on the job too. And it was amazing. It worked, and it actually came up off the pads just a little bit when we got the whole thing completely stiff. And it's like, wow, okay.
So did you have to put a roller underneath each of these pads?
No, no, just on the ends, and we might have blocked in somewhere in the middle and made a 3-point, you know, a 3-point landing for it.
And then this big trellis frame up top, is that part of the same machine? But you can't lift from it.
Exactly. That was just there for rigidity for the whole machine to keep the ends from, you know, collapsing in on each other. Because the
Wow.
ends were, you can see they're giant cast iron, you know, big giant motors and gears and stuff. Just the end pieces of these things weighed probably 12 or 15,000 pounds. And then it had all these little jack shafts. It's just a loom. It's just a giant heavy duty loom.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm noticing now on this trellis frame up top, all these cross beams go one direction diagonally, and then Ward put all the turnbuckles the other direction diagonally. So it's as rigid as it could possibly be.
Exactly. Yeah. And then bridging it, you know, was really the key. So they were really excited when they were able to, you know, save literally 5 or 6 months of downtime and 5 or 6 months of labor to disassemble and reassemble these things. And we moved them into New York in like 2 weeks. And I didn't go to New York to put them in, but I think they went in through a second floor window.
What?
Yeah.
Holy.
Yeah.
With a crane?
Yeah. No, I think Gary might have, I think Gary might have loaded them out. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure they might have come out of the second floor or they went in the second floor.
What an amazing,
Crazy stuff.
that's a cool job.
There's the same general principle. My grandfather put it in the printing presses for the Phoenix Republican Gazette. That looks like the 30s or 40s, long time ago.
They just rolled it in on those big crib
Oakum
blocks.
rollers, yeah. And they build platforms. See the cribbing? See those
Yeah.
big 6x8s?
Yeah, these here.
We had millions of them.
And you
So
just
build a
rolled
big
it
old
down.
platform, put down steel plates, and roll stuff in with winches.
Oh yeah, look, the entire floor is covered in wood.
Yeah, I'm doing it Egyptian style.
Yeah, for real. Is that so that you don't crack the concrete as you're rolling it?
No, so you can do it by hand without mechanical assistance, really. just with cables and pulleys and come-alongs and tuggers and
Dude,
yeah,
this is just a round piece of wood.
yeah, those were state of the art, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a big deal. I think you can see my grandfather. He was kind of a dandy guy. He always wore a jacket, like he always dressed up when he was on these jobs.
Which one?
The one in the middle,
This guy?
the guy with the jacket on. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah, Egyptian style for real. They're just rolling it in on
yeah.
wooden rollers.
And I had an opportunity to bid on taking all that old equipment out of there, and that stuff, Nate, was literally stacked. Those big rollers and those printers, they were in a big rack that were like stacked 3 high on top of each other. And they had to have built platforms and rolled them in the same way. I wish my grandfather was around to ask him how they did it, but it was just an enormous job, and it was way over my head just to disassemble the thing and demo it. And he put it all in there with this stuff, chain falls and rollers.
Well, yeah, and then back in the day,
Yeah,
everything
look
was
at the
made
giant
out of,
chain falls. And see the guy standing up on the upper left?
yeah.
They're getting ready to receive it. So they're going to roll this thing in, pull it up with those giant chain falls, and then roll it over where those guys are standing to receive it.
And back then, everything was made out of cast iron and it weighed a zillion pounds.
Weighed a zillion pounds.
That's amazing. So this is like a really precise piece of wooden roller, right?
I think they were made out of oakum. That's what Dad used to call them, the oakum rollers. Granddad always really took care of his oakum rollers.
Wow.
And then, he kind of got to start, before World War II with when there was a Reynolds aluminum foundry here in Phoenix. And, kind of what would be considered downtown Phoenix now. And he was kind of the crane and rigging guy in town at the time. And he put all that stuff in, and he did this job, and lots of wild stuff. Stuff that was way over my head, way over anything that I ever did or was capable of.
That's so cool. I'm so glad we're capturing this history for memories.
Yeah, me too. Glad we're zooming in on this stuff. Very
That's
cool.
amazing stuff.
Back in the good old boat racing days, family always was into boat racing. I got tons of pictures and videos and all kinds of stuff of Granddad and Dad boat racing. They were in the what they called the Arizona Navy, and when the big hydros would come to town, the big unlimiteds, Granddad was kind of the guy for boat racing and cranes.
So during the boat races, he would lift the boats off the trailer with the crane and put them into the lake.
Yeah, the big unlimiteds. Yeah, Granddad and Dad raced the little ones.
Yeah, and the unlimiteds. These are these big. They're called shovel nose hydroplanes, and they use old World War II airplane engines like the Merlin.
Yeah, a big Lycoming and Merlin motors. Yeah, there was an amazing story when I wasn't around when these pictures were taken, but I mean, if you've ever been around an engine like that starting up, it's something you'll never forget. It makes every hair on the back of your neck stand up. That's for sure.
Yeah, so not everyone might be knowing what I'm talking about when I say Merlin engine. These engines in particular, like this era of World War II engines, these were 27 liters. It's like a normal car is like 3 or 4
Wow,
liters.
27 liters?
1,500 cubic inches. So think about like a small block Chevy. It's 300 cubic inch small block Chevy. These are 1,500 cubic inches, and they have 2,000 horsepower. And these guys would put turbos on them sometimes.
And you remember I had an F class, and it was really not much different than these, in their build, which is super lightweight mahogany fiberglass together, and these boats are not much different. There's a little bit of aluminum structure in the engine compartment and around the where the the shaft goes into the water, and the rudder and the transom. But the rest is super lightweight wood and epoxy and glass and fiberglass. It's amazing.
Yeah.
They're so lightweight, and like you said, they put these giant 2,000 horsepower motors in them.
Yeah. Was this Lake Pleasant?
Yeah.
Cool. So
Before it got
cool.
super big. Yeah.
Man, that's amazing. We should go. We have I have a bunch of old boat photos. We could do a video on that someday.
I do. I've got a whole bunch. We'll start doing that and messing around with that. There's the old crane yard. That looks like down on Madison Avenue. I think it's down at the railroad tracks. They're loading up something on a truck. Old truck, old crane. Granddad's crane. You zoom in on that?
Yeah. So what do we got here?
I love that his logo was so cool. If you can find his logo. It's kind of on the front up there. Yeah.
JL Wilkerson. This is as far in as I can zoom, unfortunately. Just a big old crane.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a 4010 P&H.
So I'm noticing this little box here. Did it have its own engine on the crane and then another drive engine?
It did. Yeah. It had its own engine. So the truck engine underneath the above the next to the cab, that's where the engine is.
And then this has its own engine. And did they have hydraulic systems back there, or was it all clutches and cables and
Clutches and
chains?
cables, man. Clutches and cables. Yeah.
So you would attach, there'd be an engine in here, which would be attached to a clutch with a
Right next to
drive
the
on
guy. Right behind and to the side of the guy.
and then that would drive the pulley, which would pull these cables.
Different levers would engage different clutches, right? To lower the boom, raise the boom, lower the load, raise the load,
So did they have forklifts back then?
Yeah.
And were they clutch operated as well, or did they have early hydraulics?
Early hydraulics. Well, I'm not sure when this picture was taken. That truck looks old. I'm not sure when this was taken or where this was taken. If this looks like just the train yards downtown Phoenix in like the 40s or 50s. So yeah, they had forklifts then.
Cool. Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. Recognize that?
That is a big reactor for a steam generator going into, I think, SRP or APS. And it's big. I remember there's some more pictures that go along with this that I recall. And it's big. And once again, look, it's everything supported with giant oak beams. Yeah. That was a
So
big
these look
thing.
like steam tubes. So you would
Yeah,
run.
it's some kind of reactor vessel. Not nuclear reactor, but just some kind of like steam reactor vessel or some kind of generating device. There's a big press getting ready to go through a hole in the roof.
This is your DMX poster logo.
Yeah. I remember taking that picture. Had Dan, Marty, and Marco Crane there.
You're
had the 120.
That's a good artistic eye. That's cool.
That was my poster for a long time. Just there's another standard shear.
Yeah.
There's some big presses rolling in. I think you can zoom in on those. You can see the rollers. We probably set it right on the rollers.
These down here.
Yeah.
This is that big press that came in on its back and you tilted it up.
No, this is a much smaller one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, no, that one actually did, but there's a couple that came in that are a lot bigger.
Right.
Oh yeah, those were able to. We didn't have to stand them up inside; they were small enough.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
There's one going in on its back. That's just a big stamping press, and there it is, standing it up with the mighty knuckle boom and oak blocks everywhere.
Oakums.
That was extra dumb.
What is this?
Oh my god, this guy really wanted to scale inside the warehouse. And we concocted this scheme to drive this thing in. And we clipped his light, but that was it. That was the only damage. It was a miracle. It was amazing.
So this is a scale?
Yeah.
And why did he want it inside his warehouse?
I do not know. I do not know why he
Was it
wanted
inside his warehouse or your warehouse?
Inside his warehouse. He bought it and he wanted it delivered and wanted it inside. And it's like, well, this thing's bigger than the door. You realize that, right?
That's why you tilted it on its side and then chained it up at this angle?
Yeah. And there's
so
another
let me
forklift
guess.
at the other end.
You have a roller over here and the forklift over here?
No, just two forklifts. So if it goes south, it tips over both of them.
Oh my God. And so you guys were just walking the forklifts?
Yeah.
One going forward, one going backwards?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, not good. Well, I mean, it's just you do what you do. You have the tools available and nothing really unsafe or illegal. Just being creative, I suppose.
Yeah,
It wasn't over the capacity of the lifts by any means. It wasn't very heavy. It was just bulky, you know.
that's pretty funny. What kind of operation was he doing where he needed a scale inside?
I don't recall. I think he was a powder coater, and for some reason he had in his head that he could bill by the pound or something. I have no idea. It was weird. I never did figure out why he wanted this thing in there. We're boat racing. Mm-hmm.
So this is that same crane.
Yeah, I think Granddad had a handful of these. I think he had 3 or 4 of these.
And do you think, was this crane custom built or was it?
No, this is a P&H. It's a P&H hydraulic truck crane you can buy off the shelf.
Yeah. So you can see this big engine here. This is the 12-cylinder Merlin engine. And then the driver's right behind it.
I mean, and it's just all lightweight wood and fiberglass.
Yeah. So you can also see how this is the top of the intake manifold, which is tilted at an angle. And that angle is the same as the output drive shaft. So these things were
Exactly.
direct
You look at
drive.
it, it's just coming out the back of the motor into the shaft. Yeah.
Yeah. Direct drive, no transmission. These things only turn like 2,500 RPM, maybe 3,000
Really?
RPM.
But they make an enormous amount of torque.
Yeah, because the same thing on the propellers, those are direct drive as well on the airplanes, but the bigger the diameter of the propeller is, the slower the RPM has to be. Otherwise, the tips of the propellers break the speed of sound and then
Yeah,
break.
they go supersonic and yeah. So yeah, boat racing and cranes.
So cool. So cool.
And there's my granddad and his first crane. He loved boats, as you can see.
We all love boats.
We all love boats. But yeah, he built this thing. It was an old truck, and he hung a whole bunch of counterweight on it in the form of chains and giant navy chains and ingots of steel, and he beefed up the front end, and he built this boom. And at that time, there was no welding; it was all hand riveted. There was no Miller welder, and he built this thing, and at the time, APS was jacking and cribbing to put transformers on poles. And we'll have to find an example of that. But to go up like, 30 feet and put a power transformer on a pole, transformers like, 3 feet tall, maybe 2 feet in diameter and weighs maybe, 800 or 1,000 pounds. And they would jack and crib them up. And it would take them literally an entire day to install one of these transformers. They said, "Hey, Slim, do you think that thing of yours would put one of those transformers on the wall? I mean, up on a pole?" And he said, "I don't know. Let's give it a try." And they did, and it worked. And they're like, "Oh, okay." So the crane rental business was born in Arizona with that machine because he had built it to put in equipment at Reynolds.
Wow.
Isn't that nuts? He had seen a picture of one. He kind of knew what they were supposed to do and what they looked like. So he just decided to build his own. Same thing with the boats.
Wow. He had an idea of what it was supposed to look like. The thing that's amazing to me was that this entire frame is riveted together without welds.
Yeah. And his idea is, so funny in life and in business how things can change. He was going to go into the tow truck business, and he was going to revolutionize the tow truck business because he thought it was silly that when there was an accident and the cars went off the road or they made a big mess, that they just drug them up onto a trailer and did more damage to them and kind of ruined them more. So his idea was he built this thing that could show up with another truck and trailer, and he could quickly grab the cars and set them on the trailer in a much better way than just dragging them up on a trailer. And he was going to be in the tow truck business and use his crane for that. And then, the crane business just kind of evolved differently for him of what he thought. He built it for one thing, and it turned out to be really useful for something entirely different.
Wow. Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And he built this crane himself.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And he's not very old. I don't think he's more than like 30 or 35 in this picture, man.
Yeah, there he is.
Yeah. Look at him.
Grandpa Slim.
Yeah. I wonder why they called him Slim.
Yeah, wow.
Look, you had little mechanical outriggers on the back.
Yeah, I noticed those. These?
Yeah, I've never zoomed in on these pictures, man. Wow. And that's in his driveway on Coolidge.
That's amazing.
Hell of a pool player too. Love them
Yeah.
billiards. Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out where the cabling goes. So this cable does the tilt of the boom, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then is there another winch down here to pull this cable, which is the lift pulley?
I don't know. Yeah,
If you
there's a
line.
cable. Yeah, there's a cable right there on that skookum, on that block. Look, he's just got just a little pulley up there.
Yeah.
He's got a double pulley to move the boom up and down, so he can pick up more weight. See how he quadrupled his capacity with that pulley, and then he's got just a regular skookum for his live line. Wow.
Yeah, right there.
I wish I was smart like that guy.
How were those winches actuated?
With a PTO off the engine, power takeoff. You pull
Oh,
in
so
and you engage a lever, and it drives a hydraulic clutch that gets power to the winches.
cool. Man, that's so cool. That's amazing.
There he is in his jacket on the right.
Yeah, and this is that big press again.
Yeah, he was older. He was, quite a bit older when this picture was taken.
So this is that same printing press.
Yeah.
And these are wooden rollers
Mm-hmm.
that we were talking about.
Yeah. Watch your
I see.
fingers,
So they
fellas.
built the ramp, and then the winch line on the back of
Right
the
there.
crane is lowering
Yeah.
it down. That looks like a really heavy thing.
It's super heavy.
Look at this guy. His fingers are like right
Yeah,
there.
look, dude, get your fingers out of there.
Get your fingers out of there.
Wow. And it's it's on a pallet. It's on a skid. Or they built a skid for it. Who knows? And it came from Scott Paper Company. Isn't that amazing?
That is amazing.
Well, continues to be broiling hot here in Phoenix, Arizona. I'll tell you what, if you need heat stress, you better get it now. We got a special going. If you can zoom in on the door, zoom in on that door. He had a cool logo. Is that as far as you can go?
Yeah, JL Wilkerson, crane
Well, it
rigging.
had like a block, and it had like a hand that was like, boom up. It was like a hand signal. It was a really cool logo. Well, we'll find some more pictures and
So what are they installing here? This looks like a power line.
for I think it's a power line, a power generator, power cable tower.
Tower, yeah.
But there again, look at all the giant piles of wood blocks. Zoom in on the right.
God.
Yeah.
Wow.
Don't go anywhere without your 5,000 wood blocks.
Yeah, that's a lot. You never have too many crib blocks.
Yeah, I didn't realize how much Jenga would be a big part of my life.